The issue now that Andrew Cuomo is bringing up in New York is that he is a Ugandan citizen. Uganda is a country where they homosexuals.
So somebody who is a dual citizen can't be mayor of New York, or?
I would renounce, if I was the dual citizen with a country whose policy, the government policy was we homosexuals, yeah, I would renounce that citizenship. I don't, and to not, and he also,
I think that is buying into a fear. I think that is buying into a fear framework that is not good. It's not good for the country. It's not good for the country.
You shouldn't be afraid of that.
In this video, Bill Maher sharply criticizes Zohran Mamdani's policies, and the discussion quickly turns intense. The bold comedian even calls out members of his own party for supporting Mamdani and AOC's ideas, warning that it could lead to another election loss. Bill Maher holds nothing back in his remarks. So, hit the subscribe button, and let's get into it.
Democrats seem to be having this debate whether or not Maher Mamdani is a socialist or a democratic socialist. Let me settle it. He's a straight-up communist. How do I know this? Well, I'm reading between the lines when one of his major advisors says, elect more communists.
That one line stopped everyone cold. For months, Democrats had been presenting Mamdani as a fresh reformer, but Maher wasn't buying any of it. He ripped the mask clean off so everyone could see the ideology underneath. Maher argues that he understands the risks of communist-style thinking and believes it could not only damage America but also hurt the party's chances of regaining power. He then went straight for Mamdani's polished social media image and exposed it, but he wasn't done yet. What he said next shocked many Democrats and left the discussion wide open.
It's fine. It's a belief system. He's allowed to believe it, and people are allowed to vote for it. But if liberals deny it, like he's just going through a goth phase, they're going to lose more elections. This is not a communist country.
And there it is, the concern that many Democrats should be paying attention to. A large portion of the DNC often argues that radicalism exists only on the right and not within their own ranks. They dismiss more extreme voices as temporary, assuming they will eventually move on. However, over time, it becomes increasingly clear that these figures are not simply passing through the movement. Instead, they are actively shaping and influencing the direction of the party. Maher warns that dismissing Mamdani's socialist push as a passing phase could backfire on Democrats in a serious way. And this is where tensions escalate. Wait until you hear what Mamdani's own staff reportedly has to say.
It matters that the mayor stands by, and so I assume stands with, someone who says things like, if you don't believe in the government's sacred right to seize private property, it's over. Seize private property. Home ownership is racist. Elect more communists. Private property, especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy. Really? Even among the 20 million black Americans who own their own home?
Yes, you heard that right, and it comes directly from C. Weaver, the newly appointed New York City director of the Office to Protect Tenants. If this is the kind of person Mamdani has placed in charge of housing policy, then many people believe it raises serious concerns. While it is only New York, it is also the financial heartbeat of America and one of the most influential cities in the world. Critics argue that if the city continues electing democratic socialists like Mamdani and assigning key roles to figures like C. Weaver, it reflects a major political shift. According to this perspective, such developments suggest deeper changes in governance, with supporters and opponents sharply divided over what it means for the future of the city and the country.
I know the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chávez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century, a fucking mess.
And here is what makes this situation even more concerning to critics. Both Zohran and AOC have gained strong support among younger Democrats, promoting socialist-leaning ideas that appeal to a large segment of their base. Their proposals often include promises of expanded public services, higher taxes on the wealthy, and wealth redistribution policies. Supporters view these ideas as solutions to inequality, while critics argue they raise serious economic concerns. Bill Maher has expressed skepticism toward these types of policies, referencing historical examples of countries that adopted socialist systems with mixed or negative outcomes. He often contrasts these systems with capitalist economies, arguing that they have produced higher living standards and more economic opportunity. Examples frequently cited in these debates include countries such as Cuba, Venezuela, and the former Soviet Union, which critics point to when discussing the risks of centralized economic systems. Supporters of socialism, however, argue that these comparisons are oversimplified and do not reflect modern democratic socialist policies. At the center of the debate is a broader disagreement about the role of government in the economy and how best to address inequality. While some see these ideas as necessary reforms, others believe they could lead to unintended economic consequences. As a result, this issue continues to divide opinion, especially among younger voters and within the Democratic Party itself.
Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that?
But Maher isn't done pulling back the curtain. He goes further, highlighting what he believes many Democrats are reluctant to say openly. Zohran Mamdani identifies with the Democratic Party, but critics argue he represents a more democratic socialist ideology rather than traditional party lines. His policy vision, as described by supporters and critics alike, includes expanded public services such as broader access to education, healthcare, and transportation, along with proposals aimed at reducing living costs for citizens. However, one of the key questions raised in this debate is how such programs would be funded. Mamdani and his supporters often point to higher taxes on wealthy individuals as a primary solution. While this approach is presented as straightforward, critics argue that it raises concerns about long-term economic sustainability. Supporters of these ideas view them as necessary reforms to address inequality, while opponents warn about potential financial strain and unintended consequences if government spending expands significantly. At the center of the discussion is a broader disagreement about taxation, public services, and the role of government in the economy, an issue that continues to divide opinion across the political spectrum.
10% pay 72% of all federal income taxes, and the bottom half, 3%. The Democratic Socialists talk about socialism like we don't already have a lot. Social Security, unemployment, Medicare, nutritional assistance, Medicaid, Obamacare, disability, housing subsidies. Again, not against it, just the same question. How can you be soaking the rich and failing the poor so bad?
So, here is the central question many critics raise. How exactly are these proposed programs going to be funded? Supporters of these policies often give the same response: higher taxes on wealthy individuals. They argue that the wealthy should contribute more, while critics say this argument oversimplifies a much more complex economic issue. Some also point to tax distribution data, claiming that a significant share of income taxes is already paid by high earners, while lower income groups contribute a smaller portion. However, economists and analysts continue to debate how tax burdens are measured and what fair share actually means in practice. At the heart of the discussion is a broader question about government spending and fiscal responsibility, specifically, how existing tax revenue is allocated and whether current systems are operating efficiently. This ongoing debate continues to shape political conversations around taxation, public spending, and economic policy.
The truth, you're not going to get health care to these people by threatening to tax and eat the rich. You raise billionaires' taxes, they just leave the state. Or they leave the country. Or in some cases, the planet. I kid Elon, but you know, he had a good idea recently that might be apropos here. during the recent government shutdown, he volunteered to pay all the TSA workers himself, with couch money. That's how super rich our super rich are. They can single-handedly fund entire government programs. Okay, so let's make that a thing.
And this is where Maher delivers what he describes as one of his strongest warnings, one that he believes policymakers need to seriously consider. He argues that if wealthy individuals are heavily taxed or pressured beyond what they consider sustainable, some may choose to relocate their businesses and assets elsewhere. He points to states like California and New York, which have high tax rates and continue to see some high-income residents and business owners move to lower tax states such as Florida and Texas. Supporters of this view argue that this trend could have long-term economic implications, while others say it is influenced by multiple factors beyond taxation alone, including lifestyle, business opportunities, and cost of living. At a broader level, the debate centers on how tax policy affects economic mobility, investment, and public revenue. While some believe higher taxes on top earners are necessary for funding public programs, others warn about potential economic consequences if tax burdens become too high. This remains an ongoing political and economic debate with strong opinions on both sides.
This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal? It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods.
And this is the real warning that critics say is buried underneath everything Maher is arguing. According to this perspective, the issue is not just about New York or individual political figures, but about the broader direction of the Democratic Party. The argument suggests that if the party continues to support and elevate more progressive or left-leaning voices, it could face significant political consequences in future elections, including 2028. Critics of this view believe that moderate, independent, and swing voters often play a decisive role in national elections, and that these groups may respond differently to more progressive policy positions. However, supporters of progressive policies argue that their platform reflects necessary reforms and changing public priorities, especially among younger voters. At the center of this debate is a broader question about political strategy, voter alignment, and the future direction of major parties in the United States. Whether these trends will shape upcoming elections remains uncertain, but it continues to be a key topic of political discussion.
Governor-elect Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal! At this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in. In 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that shit again. We've had enough of Trump's macho bullshit and also enough of pussy politics.
And to be clear, Maher's warning focuses on what he believes could happen if a Democratic socialist were ever elected to the White House. From this perspective, the concern is not a gradual shift in policy, but a more rapid and significant move toward socialist-leaning governance. Critics argue that policies often labeled as woke would not only continue under such leadership but could expand further, leading to a larger and more active role for government in everyday life. Supporters of these ideas, however, see them as necessary reforms aimed at addressing social and economic inequality, while opponents view them as excessive government intervention. Some commentators also reference examples from political organizations and movements to illustrate how ideological beliefs influence policy discussions and internal practices. At the center of this debate is a broader disagreement about the future direction of government, the balance between public welfare and individual freedom, and how far policy reforms should go in modern American politics.
These Democratic socialists at another of their conventions, they were told to make jazz hands instead of clapping, lest some delegates suffer sensory overload. And also, and I'm not joking, they were told not to be wearing, any aggressive scents.
please don't go into that space with anything that's like an aggressive scent, for instance, right? Because that's going to be difficult for people.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
And that is the full picture Maher has been presenting from the beginning. According to this perspective, the discussion is not just about Zohran Mamdani or New York City, but about the broader direction of the Democratic Party and, ultimately, the future of American politics. Maher, a lifelong liberal, is portrayed as someone who is deeply concerned about the current trajectory of his own party, warning that it may be moving in a direction that could have serious political and economic consequences. Supporters of this view argue that some socialist-leaning policy proposals may appear appealing on the surface, but critics believe they could lead to long-term financial and governance challenges. However, supporters of these policies see them as necessary reforms aimed at addressing inequality and expanding public services. At the center of the debate is a fundamental disagreement about taxation, government spending, and the role of the state in everyday life. While some believe these policies represent progress, others argue they could reshape the economy in ways that may be difficult to sustain. In the end, this ongoing political debate continues to influence elections, public opinion, and party strategy. Whether these warnings are heeded or not remains to be seen. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. See you in the next one.